song starts, should start in 10 seconds. And
thou in the cold blast on yonder lea, my plaidie to the angry head, I'd shelter thee, or did the Trojans bitter storms around thee blow, thy build should be my bosom to share it wildest waste, say black and bare, the desert were a paradise, if thou wert there, or were I monarch o'er the globe, with thee to reign, the brightest jewel in my crown would be my queen,
So welcome everybody here and online. I have a few things to say about Schiller, but before that we're going to hear from our friend John Segerson.
hold on. Are you wearing the lapel microphone?
No, should I?
Yes.
Okay. I will wear the lapel microphone. Did they hear anything I said?
Kind of.
Hello, people out in space. Did you hear anything I said just now?
It's muted. Can you unmute it?
I don't know.
Speak.
Hello. Is that working now?
It's unmuted. It was always unmuted. It was muted on Dave's end, if anything.
There's no sound
No, there's sound from the room.
from the room, so this doesn't matter then, right?
I'm getting a lot of groans and
All right, well, we can't hear those.
No, they can't hear you. Just you
Okay,
can just
fine.
hold this.
So, whatever, technical difficulties. I apologize to the people who are watching on the live stream. What we're going to do right now, which you will be able to hear because it's being beamed in remotely, is John Segerson, who director of the Schiller Institute Chorus, has not been directing them the last season due to various health concerns, but I'd like you to really pay attention. He's going to share with us a little bit about Schiller, but from the perspective of another German writer, and I'll let him explain that in his presentation.
Hi there. I'm going to read to you some passages from a treatise written by the poet Heinrich Heine in 1835 titled The Romantic School, which ought to be required reading for all of you. Heinrich Heine was born in 1797, so he was only 8 years old when Schiller died in 1805. He was born in Dusseldorf, only a short distance from Beethoven's birthplace in Bonn. His family was Jewish, and he was a distant relative of Karl Marx, whom he got to know personally later on. It's an historical irony that during Heine's early years, Dusseldorf was occupied by France, and that the Jews there had somewhat more freedom and better educational opportunities than in many other parts of Germany. So Heine grew up in the shadow of both Schiller and also of Goethe, who hung around until 1832. Writing in 1835, in this passage, Heine refers to a controversy that broke out in 1821, which was sparked, ironically enough, by the publication of a carefully crafted lampoon of Goethe's Werther novels, written by a fellow named Pustkuchen. Anyway, Heine writes, and now I'll go to my quote, "People fell into a fashion of comparing the production of both poets, and opinions were divided. The Schillerites vaunted the moral grandeur of a Max Piccolomini, a Thekla, a Marquis of Posa, and other characters in their repertoire, declaring that Goethe's Philine, Kätzchen, Klärchen, and other beautiful creatures were immoral wretches. The Goetheans admitted, smiling, that these personages, and perhaps others, did not appear to be moral, but that the propagation of morality, as required by these poems, was not at all the aim of art, because in art there are no aims, as in the construction of the universe, into which man has forced his ideas of end and aim. Art, like the world, exists for itself alone. So, they argued, as the world must ever be the same, though men incessantly vary in their opinions, so art should be quite independent of the temporal views of humanity. Art should therefore be free from morality, which is ever changing in the world so often as a new religion displaces an old one. Therefore, the Goetheans, from this point of view, regard art as an independent second world, which they place so high that all efforts or works of mankind, their religion and morals, move and pass far below it, shifting and changing. But I cannot unconditionally worship it. The Goetheans let themselves be led by it to proclaim art itself as the highest, and turn aside from the requirements of the real world, to which precedence is due. Schiller attached himself much more closely than Goethe to this world, and for this he deserves praise. The spirit of his age took firm and fast hold of Friedrich Schiller. It struggled with him, was conquered by him, followed him to the field, bore his banner, and it was the same banner under which they fought so enthusiastically in those days yon side of the Rhine, for which we are always ready to shed our best blood. Schiller wrote for the great ideas of the Revolution. He destroyed the intellectual Bastilles. He built at the Temple of Liberty, and indeed at that great temple which should enclose all races like a brotherly community, for he was a cosmopolite. He began with that hatred of the past which we see in his Robbers, where he is like a little Titan who has played truant from school and drunk schnapps and smashed in Jupiter's windows, and ended with that love for the future which we already see blooming in Don Carlos, like a forest of flowers, he himself being the Marquis of Posa, who at once prophet and soldier, and who, under a Spanish cloak, bears the noblest heart which ever loved and suffered in all Germany. The poet, the lesser after-creator, is like our dear Lord in this, that he makes his men after his own image. If Karl Moor, of the robbers, and the Marquis of Posa are all Schiller himself, so Goethe resembles his own Werther, Wilhelm Meister, and Faust, in whom we can study all the phases of his life. If Schiller throws himself headlong into history, becomes enthusiastic for the social progress of mankind, and sings universal history, Goethe plunges into individual feelings, art, or nature. Goethe, the pantheist, finally took up the history of nature as his chief occupation and gave us the results of his researches, not only in poems, but in scientific works. His indifferentism was likewise a result of his pantheism. It's more the pity, true, that pantheism has not infrequently made men into indifferentists. If everything is God, they said, it is all one, whether a man busies himself with clouds or with antique gems, popular ballads, or monkey's bones, mankind or comedians. But just there lies the error. All is not God, but God is all. God does not manifest himself in equal measure in everything. He manifests himself far more in different degrees, in different things, and everything feels in itself the impulse to attain a higher grade of divinity. And that is the great law of progress in nature. No, God does not manifest himself equally in all things, as Wolfgang Goethe believed, who thereby became an indifferentist, and instead of occupying himself with the highest interests of mankind, devoted life to artistic play, anatomy, theory of colors, botany, and meteorology. God manifests himself more or less in things. He lives in this constant manifestation. He is in movement, action, in time. His holy breath inspires and waves the leaves of history. This is the real book of God, and that Friedrich Schiller divined and felt, and he became a, quote, retrospective prophet, unquote. And he wrote The Fall of the Netherlands, and the 30 Years' War, and The Maid of Orleans, and Tell. I have never denied the intrinsic value of the works of Goethe. They adorn our dear fatherland as beautiful statues adorn a garden. But they are statues. One may fall in love with them, but they are sterile. The Goethean poems do not develop action like those of Schiller. The deed is the child of the word, and the beautiful words of Goethe are childless, which is the curse of all which is born only of art. Thank you.
So I hope you followed that, because it's extremely significant, the difference between Schiller and Goethe, and why Schiller's work is so important for today. And I have to say, there's various things of Schiller that have been going around in my head. One, I mean, first of all, I'll just say, I think that everybody is profoundly anguished by what is happening in Gaza, and not more so because for those of us who live in the United States, we know that our government could put a stop to the slaughter in 5 seconds, but it's not. And it's at such an extreme, and this is why I'm hopeful, and this is why we have to rapidly educate, elevate the approach to this crisis. If you look at what's happening in the institutions, Josh Paul's resignation in the State Department and his admission that there are probably thousands of people in the State Department who vehemently oppose the policy, the walkout in Washington of the congressional staffers who say we are fielding thousands of phone calls from the American people who want this to stop, who want a ceasefire, who want the bloodletting to stop, and the congressmen who are supposed to be representing the people who are calling their offices are not responding. They're continuing with the mantra of whatever, and you heard perhaps the most obscenely in the Republican debate, oh, we should make Gaza a parking lot. And I don't know where people think that this ends if you continue that, but the fact that you have this kind of resistance, when I participated in the Rage Against the War Machine rally in Washington, D.C., that was the largest anti-war demonstration since the Iraq War, and it was perhaps 3,500 people. We had last Saturday in Washington, I don't know, somewhere between 100 and 300,000 people. So there is a shift, but the question is, suppose we stopped the slaughter tomorrow, then what? And how do you create the conditions that mankind grows up and stops using war as a method of resolving disagreements? Because I have very clearly in my mind's eye a time when human beings, provided we survive, there's no wood to knock on right here, provided we don't annihilate ourselves, people will look back on the idea that you did physical harm to another human being and they'll say, oh, it was like the cavemen, what a bunch of barbarians, who would ever have thought that human beings would conduct themselves in such a way? So I keep thinking of the Ode to Joy, Friedrich Schiller's poem, which Beethoven set in the Ninth Symphony, and not merely the alle Menschen werden Brüder, and forgive my German pronunciation, all men become brethren, all men become brothers, but the idea that Schiller expresses that in the heaven must a loving Father dwell. And I think this is really a challenge. When I was growing up, there was a minister. I used to, besides going to Quaker meeting, my family loved music, and I sang in the Congregational Church choir, and being a small town of 3,000 people, everybody knew everybody, and the minister was the father of my best friend in school. And he and his wife had moved to Bar Harbor from South Africa. And this must have been in the must have been late 1970s. I don't know myself what was happening in South Africa at the time, but whatever it was, he was really upset about it, and he resigned from the church. He said, I can't pastor this church anymore because I've concluded that God must not exist. That God can't exist if this kind of horror is unfolding in the world. Now that shows a very profound lack of understanding of what God is and the relationship of human beings to God. So that being said, as kind of a teaser, I'm going to read you just a little bit from Schiller's essay on universal history. And there's a lot here, and a lot of the meat of it I'm not going into, and we have it in this book here. And I will say, if you donate to my campaign, you can get a copy of the book. So it's there in the back. But there's a lot in here. Lainey, who is going to be speaking after me, will go through another element of it. The whole first section I'm not touching, which is the difference between the bread-fed scholar, that is someone who just learns to go through the motions, get a job, and they get completely enraged when anyone ever discovers something new because it overturns what they learned. I'm sure none of you know anyone like that. And then there's the philosophical mind that loves new ideas, that's always seeking to make a harmony of the whole. And Schiller said, I went through this in my lecture, which, by the way, this lecture, and this is important, was May 26th or 27th in 1789. It was before the storming of the Bastille, which occurred in July. And I say that because I don't know if it had been written after that, if it would have been quite as optimistic. I just don't know. Maybe it would have been. He was right. But anyway, just listen to this arc. He writes, the discoveries which our European mariners have made in distant oceans and on remote coastlines present us a spectacle as constructive as it is entertaining. They show us tribes which surround us at the most diverse levels of culture, like children of different ages gathered around an adult, reminding him by their example of what he used to be and where he started from. A wise hand seems to have preserved these raw tribes for us down to our times, where we would be advanced enough in our own culture to make fruitful application of this discovery upon ourselves, and to restore out of this mirror the forgotten origin of our species. But how shaming and sad is the picture these people give us of our childhood. And yet the level at which we see them is not even the first. Mankind began even more contemptuously. Those we study today we already find as nations, as political bodies, but mankind first had to elevate itself by an extraordinary effort to political society. Now, what do these travelers tell us about these savages? They found some without any knowledge of the most indispensable skills, without iron, without the plow, some even without possession of fire. Some still wrestled with wild beasts for food and dwelling. Among many, language had scarcely been elevated from animal sounds to understandable signs. A little bit like some people speak today, but in some places, there was not even the simple bond of marriage. As yet, no knowledge of property, and in others, the flaccid soul was not even able to retain an experience which repeats itself every day. One saw the savage carelessly relinquish the bed on which he slept because it did not occur to him that he would sleep again tomorrow. War, however, was with them all, and the flesh of the vanquished enemy was not seldom the prize of victory. Among others, acquainted with various leisures of life, who had already achieved a higher level of culture, slavery and despotism presented us a dreadful picture of them. Once we find a tyrant in Africa, trading his subjects for a gulp of brandy. Another time they would be slaughtered on his grave to serve him in the underworld. Where once pious simplicity prostrates itself to a ridiculous fetish, another time it is to a terrible monster. Mankind portrays himself in his gods. Where over there we see denigrating slavery, stupidity, superstition bow him down, yet another time we see him utterly miserable on the other extreme of lawless freedom, always armed for attack and defense, startled by every noise. The savage strains his cautious ear into the desert. Everything new is the enemy. And woe to the stranger whom a storm has cast upon the coast. No hospital hearth will smoke for him, no sweet hospitality comfort him. But even where mankind has elevated itself from hostile solitude to community, from privation to luxury, from fear to joy, how bizarre and atrocious he seems to our eyes. His crude taste seeks joy in stupor, beauty in distortion, glory in exaggeration. Even his virtue awakens horror in us, and what he calls his bliss can only arouse our disgust and pity. So were we. Caesar and Tacitus found us not much better 1,800 years ago. Where are we now? Let me linger for a moment at this epoch in which we are now living at this present shape of the world we inhabit. Human diligence has cultivated it and subdued the resting land through persistence and skill. In one part of the world, we see that mankind redeemed the land from the sea. Somewhere else, he opened rivers onto the arid land. Mankind has intermingled the regions and the seasons and has toughened the weak plants of the Orient to his own harsh climate. As he brought Europe to the West Indies and the South Seas, so he also let Asia arise in Europe. A merrier sky now laughs above Germany's forests, which the powerful hand of man tore open to the rays of sunshine, and in the waves of the Rhine are mirrored Asia's grapevines. Populous towns rise on its banks, which swarm with vigorous life of pleasure and work. Here we find a man secure in peaceful possession of his acquisitions, among millions of others whom previously a single neighbor had robbed of his slumbers. The equality he lost upon entering community, he regained through wise laws. He escaped from the blind constraint of pure chance and poverty under the more gentle constraint of treaties, and surrendered the liberty of the beast of prey to redeem the more noble freedom of the human being. Prevailing need compels him no longer to the plowshare. No enemy any longer demands of him that he leave his plow to defend home and fatherland on the battlefield. How many creations of art, how many wonders of diligence, what light in all fields of knowledge, since man no longer consumes his energies in pitiful self-defense, since it has been placed at his discretion to reconcile himself with need, which he ought never fully to escape, since he has obtained the valuable privilege to command freely over his capabilities and follow the call of his genius. What lively activity everywhere, since desires multiplied lent new wings to inventive genius and opened new spheres to his diligence. The boundaries are breached, which isolated states and nations in hostile egoism. All thinking minds are now bound together by the bond of world citizenry, and all the light of the century can now illuminate the spirit of a new Galileo and Erasmus. Since the time when the laws descended to the weakness of man, too accommodated to the laws, with them he has become gentle. Just as he ran wild when they were wild, barbaric crimes follow their barbaric punishment gradually into oblivion. A great step toward ennoblement has taken place so that the laws are virtuous, although mankind still is not. Where duties enforced upon mankind are relaxed, morality takes command of him, whom no punishment terrifies and no conscience curbs, is now held within bounds by laws of decency and honor. So Schiller is sort of taking this huge arc from complete barbarism to, in effect, describing a Renaissance period where mankind has transformed himself. And then he goes on to discuss, and he also talks about at the beginning, human history. How did we each come to be here? And how did we each come to be the person that we are? And how did our society develop? And how many different threads have contributed to that? And how can you be confident that this will develop? For example, the period that we're in today, where we see such barbarism, it's not uniform. About 2/3 of the world's population is going in a completely other direction with the Belt and Road Initiative, with the BRICS process, with the programs that Lyndon LaRouche fought for 50 years ago. So what determines which way it goes? Is it just faith? Is it divine intervention? Is it will? And I think some people might be familiar with the writings of Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz, who was a very crucial thinker and had a great deal to do with the founding of the United States. And he describes in various essays and in the Theodicy the question of the best of all possible worlds, because it was a raging debate where people said, well, if God is perfect, then can God do evil? And if evil exists in the world, does that mean that God wills for things to be evil? Because if God wanted something evil to be done, wouldn't that mean that God was less than perfect? And so how do you reconcile this problem? Leibniz talks about the question of lazy reason, where he says that some men and even Christians introduce into their dealings some mixture of fate, of stoic fate, where you say, well, I don't have to do anything, it's all ordained by God. Everyone's run into this, right? Just say these magic words and you'll be raptured or whatever. So he says, but if you watch them, you will see that they will not fail to run out of the house if it's collapsing, right? Or if they see a treasure buried in the ground, they don't sit there and say, well, I'm going to wait for God to give me the treasure, right? They'll go dig it up. So clearly people don't exactly believe this, but he uses this example, which is very funny. He said, if someone's unhealthy and you say, look, if you really want to be healthy, you should change your diet. And they say, oh no, I'm going to just keep eating whatever. But then they get sick. And so then every kind of food has a mystical, obsessive, magical quality, right? So you see this sort of yin-yang between, everything, I can do whatever I want, or it's out of my control, God will take care of it. He calls that lazy reason. And it actually brings me to a joke, and I'm going to conclude with that. And then we will go to the chorus, and then we will go to Lainey. But it's just worth thinking about, because somewhere in here is this question about what is it going to take to get from here to a renaissance, to get from here to where mankind grows up. And where is the limit between you've done everything you can and it works, and do you have to use reason all the time? So some of you may know about this. I think it happened in Louisiana during Katrina when there was the flood, and a man prayed to God to save him, and he knew that God would save him, and the waters were coming up, and his neighbor came by in a rowboat and said, get in the boat. And the man said, no, I'm fine, God's going to save me. So the water comes up to the second floor, and another friend comes by in a motorboat and says, come on, get out, the water's rising, get in the boat. And the man said, no, I'm not worried, God's going to save me. So then the water comes all the way up to the roof of the house, there's just the ridge, he's standing there, a helicopter flies over him, a rope comes down, they say, get on the helicopter, grab the rope. He says, oh no, God's going to save me. So he drowns, and he gets up to heaven, and God says, what are you doing up here? And he goes, well, you said you were going to save me. And God said, are you kidding? I sent you 2 boats and a helicopter. Okay, that's good.
So I'd like to invite chorus peoples up. We didn't really set space, so find somewhere. Margaret, would you like to help bulk up our ladies section? if a new person wants to surprise us and jump in, not just be circumspect. Okay. No, it sleeps. Okay. So women over here, tenors, basses. Please go quickly. Don't look around confused. Go find a space to stand. Jesu meine Freude. If you look around confused, I'll put you in.
If we can move down with it a little bit. There's more destruction over here. There we go.
Okay. And so just take a nice breath in and out. On the breath, I should not see shoulders going up. Okay, nice big breath in. Ready? Stop. If you have to look that much, sit it out. And listen to the others. Ready? And. Mein Hüter is from the St. Matthew's Passion. Both of these are Bach. And this one, know me, my guardian, my shepherd, take me in. From you, the source of all goodness, has much good come to me. Your mouth has nourished me with milk and sweet sustenance. Your spirit has lavished upon me much heavenly joy. Thank you. People have their notes? Yeah? That is not your note. If you aren't sure, wait, hold off. Tenor. Okay. And make sure you're listening to the other parts, yeah? 1, 2.
Ist
we're gonna, I'll just come and share the screen while people are coming out. Lainey Rubenstein, who is currently doing a whole bunch of Schiller classes and readings with the Schiller Institute, Danish, American, and China Authority, founder of the Chinese language EIR journal. Actually, Lainey, are you in there somewhere?
I'm here.
Okay.
First, I want to apologize if I repeat something that John said because I didn't have a sound when he spoke. But I did hear Diane, so if I repeat something that John said, it's because I didn't hear it. And Diane also took up certain things that I was going to take up, so I'll skip it except for one thing. I do think the Ninth Symphony, Schiller and Beethoven together is like completely adequate for the new paradigm being created. The new world shaping up now with the majority giving us that's the key hope for the future, that we succeed with this. So with that, I would like to go through just one stanza of a beautiful poem that Schiller wrote in 1789, 3 years after he wrote Ode to Joy. And there's a reason why I give you these times. Let us just have the first slide, Dave. It's just that Schiller has a beautiful view of man that he expresses in Ode to Joy, but also in this poem, The Artist. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read it in my Danish accent in German, while you can see the English translation. Die Künstler, the artists. Wie schön, o Mensch, mit deinem Palmezweige, stehst du an des Jahrhunderts Neige, in edler, stolzer Männlichkeit, mit aufgeschlossenem Sinn, mit Geistesfülle, voll milden Ernsts, in tatenreicher Stille, der reifste Sohn der Zeit. Frei durch Vernunft, stark durch Gesetze, durch Sanftmut groß und reich durch Schätze. Die lange Zeit dein Busen dir verschwieg, Herr der Natur, die deine Fesseln liebet, die deine Kraft in 1000 Kämpfen übet und prangend unter dir aus der Verwilderung stieg. This is a longer poem where Schiller, you can take the slide away, where the Schiller in the first stanza here introduces this theme for the entire poem, which he then develops through the poem. So the same year, so I'm going to just mention a few things on universal history that Diane read a section from, because I just want to emphasize that this lecture, just to give you a sense of how Schiller was functioning, because he was a poet, he was a historian, he was a philosopher, and he was very political in a very specific way. And if you can imagine that he gives this first lecture on history in front of these 20-year-olds, and he tells them point blank, there's two kinds of students. There's the students that are the so-called bread scholars that Diane mentions, and they study to get a position, to get a grade so they can earn money and be famous or whatnot, and be secure. And Schiller says, I don't care for that kind of a student. What I care for is a student who seeks truth, who is a philosophical mind, who loves when something he or she thought is completely overturned because he realizes it was wrong and there was something much better. And it is in that where Diane, in that essays, after he's gone through this, that he says, because he's very excited in 1789, and he says, all thinking minds are now bound together by the bond of world citizenry. And he concludes his lecture thus, and think about it, this is a teacher, just think about whether you are 70 or 20 or 50 years old, think about if you had a teacher like that saying, I don't want you to come here to just to get a degree and study to get comfortable in life. And then he ends the lecture such. Second slide, please. And noble desire must glow in us to also make a contribution out of our means to this rich bequest of truth, morality, and freedom, which we received from the world past, and which we must surrender once more, richly enlarged to the world to come, and in this eternal chain which winds itself through all human generations to make firm our ephemeral existence. However different the destinies may be which await you in society, all of you can contribute something to this. A path towards immortality has been opened up to every achievement, to the true immortality. I mean, where the deed lives and rushes onward, even if the name of the author should remain behind. And earlier in the essay, Schiller goes through how the importance of know from the ancient past of all the people that fought and created new ideas and so forth, what's enlightened by what Diane said, what Diane read up. And Schiller says, if you really get to know and embrace in your mind and heart all the people that came before you, and you look far ahead in the future, then your short life from birth to death becomes much easier, because you are part of not anymore. He has a beautiful description, I forget now, but he says you are not anymore just like, he doesn't say it like that, but you're not anymore like a German or a Dane or an American. No, you become part of the human species. He just says it in a very poetical way. So the reason I wanted to go through this, despite Diane had already taken some of this up, is that Schiller, from when he wrote Freude, Schön und Götterfunken, and he wrote The Artist and On Universal History, he was totally excited about the American Revolution and the French Revolution. I mean, his father was a good friend of a guy, Schubert, who wrote a monthly chronicle, the Deutsche Chronicle, where they described what was happening in America. It was spread out through Germany and otherwise in other countries too. And young people that cared about their countries and the world was following it very intensely, what was happening in America. I mean, probably a lot of you know how Schiller had over his desk a painting of Bunker's Hill. It was like, this was hope for the future. And so they thought that the French Revolution would succeed too. So Diane brought this up. She didn't know whether he knew or not. He did not when he wrote The Artist and On Universal History. So as we know, it ended in a terrible bloodshed. And Schiller stated, a great moment has found a little people. And he also said in another place, in the Song of the Bell, he said, the most terrible of terror is man in his deluded state. Think about this today. So the question is, did Schiller get depressed, withdrawn, enraged? No, he didn't. What he decided to do was to solve the reason for the failure. And he proceeded to produce some of the greatest poems, dramas, philosophical essays. He just really had a major jump in his development. Not for his own sake, but for saying, how can we figure this out? How can we create truly political freedom in the future. So in his essay on grace and dignity, he in depth, I mean, it's 57 pages, I think, something like that. And he in depth develops the notions of beauty, grace, and dignity. And he calls upon all people to strive their entire life to become a beautiful soul. And these ideas, he then later, they are all related on grace and dignity, on the aesthetic, on the letters of the aesthetic education. If I will encourage everybody to go get to know Schiller in depth, make him your really good friend for life. He will become a really strength for you whenever you are faced with problems of one kind or the other. So, but I just wanted to have this little quote that some of you know and some of you don't. If I can have the next slide on the beautiful soul, Dave. No. Slide 3, which is slide 4. Yeah. We call a soul beautiful when its moral sense of all human experience has become so steadfast that it can confidently let its emotion guide its own will without any risk of coming into contradiction with its own decisions. So Schiller develops how you get there in all his philosophical essays, but the idea is that you have to develop your emotions. You have to ennoble your emotions. You shouldn't suppress them. And it should be so that you are, whatever is necessary to do is also what you want to do, that you don't have to question an impulse, a drive, because your emotions are in cohesion with reason and with necessity. And great thinkers like Confucius had the exact same idea, but I will not go through that. So later on in the letters on aesthetic education, he says that the greatest work of art is the creation of political freedom. I think it's letter 3. I might be wrong. It's 2 or 3. I think it's letter 3. It's in a correspondence with a Danish prince who has asked Schiller, can you please help me to solve the problem we have now after the French Revolution failed? I mean, what do we do? And Schiller says, I think it's a great project, Prince, but really, because isn't that the greatest work of all art, to create political freedom? But he said, I'm not going to go there. That's not what he says. But he said, no, the only way we can get to political freedom is through the ennoblement of the individual. And when I first read that, I thought, oh my goodness, that everybody has to be ennobled. I still remember when I read it first time, I said, oh my, how is this going to happen? But it happens through individuals inspiring other individuals to do it. And as you go along testing it out, you will find that it is true. He says in letter 8, I think it is, he says, sapere aude, dare to be wise. He says in the beginning of letter 9, he says, live with your century, but don't be a creation of it. This is just, I think, on the aesthetic, on grace and dignity, the letters of aesthetic education, on the sublime, are all must readings if you want to gain a really good collaborator for the fight to strengthen you on a daily basis. His great, no, I will not say anything about that. So the ideas of Schiller and of humanity as bound together by the bond of citizenry, and his lofty ideas about man corresponds to the win-win approach of the Belt and Road. I totally think so. The BRICS and the one humankind, a shared future for humankind. I really, we should, we should even call it the paradigm of Schiller, or the new paradigm, the whatever we can figure out. But it is totally in the spirit of Schiller's ideas of man and of humanity in the future. I would like, in the end, as a solemn tribute to the people that have passed, and emphatically so recently in Ukraine, in Gaza, and in Israel. I would like to end with a playing of a stanza from Schiller's poem, The Song of the Bell, which is also written after the French Revolution had failed. And he attacks the French Revolution very sharply in that poem. And he describes how things are going fine, and then everything breaks down, and then he gives a way out to the future. One of the poems, one of the stanzas in this poem, Brahms took out and used as a tribute to the memorial of his good friend Schumann, Robert Schumann, when he had passed. And I think that's a good way of paying a tribute. So let's have the English text, and it's the Schiller Institute chorus from 3 years ago, led by John Segerson, that sings, and then you'll have the translation on the screen.
trust his seed and hopes indeed that it will blossom to bless as heaven has decreed. Still costlier, the seed we've buried with sorrow in the womb of earth, and hope that came from the coffin carried 'twill bloom a more beautiful fortune. Okay, thank you very much, Lainey. Are you able to stay connected? Yikes.
She said yes.
Okay, I think Michelle and Elliot are supposed to be
And
coming up.
Madeline?
Oh, and Madeline, okay,
Hi.
wow, trio. Madeline
And
is
Margaret.
a native German speaker.
So this is
Probably the
Flyer.
cringing over all of us.
Perhaps I'm supposed to be a bearer of bad news. Maybe not, maybe not.
The mic is here, Elliot.
Yeah.
Go behind the mic. all
What's
of
the
you.
order, Michelle?
Okay, I told Madeline you guys can decide. These two are going to help us to hear the text to a poem by Schiller called On Hope, or Die Hoffnung. And shall we go with English first? Well, he says yes.
Uh-oh.
Are they putting the poem
Now
up
we
there?
gotta move
No,
this.
they're just trying to blind us.
Hope by Friedrich Schiller. All people discourse and dream in their soul of better days that are coming. After a golden and prosperous goal, they are seen chasing and running. The world grows old and grows young in turn, but man for betterment hopes etern. 'Tis hope delivers him into life. Round the frolicsome boy doth it flutter. The youth is lured by its magic rife. It won't be interred with the elder. Though he ends in the coffin his weary lope, yet upon that coffin he plants his hope. It is no empty fawning deceit begot in the brain of a jester. Proclaimed aloud in the heart is it. We are born for that which is better. And what the innermost voice conveys, the hoping spirit ne'er that betrays.
There's a microphone here for the.
Okay. Okay, I do the German. Hoffnung. Es reden und träumen die Menschen viel von besseren künftigen Tagen. Nach einem glücklichen, goldenen Ziel sieht man sie rennen und jagen. Die Welt wird alt und wieder jung, doch der Mensch hofft immer Verbesserung. Die Hoffnung führt ihn ins Leben ein. Sie umflattert den fröhlichen Knaben. Den Jüngling locket ihr Zauberschein. Sie wird mit dem Greis nicht begraben, denn beschließt er im Grabe den müden Lauf, noch am Grabe pflanzt er die Hoffnung auf. Es ist kein leerer, schmeichelnder Wahn, erzeugt im Gehirne eines Toren. Im Herzen kündet es laut sich an, zu was Bessern sind wir geboren. Und was die innere Stimme spricht, das täuscht die hoffende Seele nicht.
So Margaret and I are going to play and sing for you a Schubert setting of this poem. And English, or do you want the German? We'll go with English.
Es reden und träumen die Menschen viel vom besseren künftigen Tagen, nach einem Glück
Die Hoffnung führt ihn ins Leben ein. Sie umflattet den fröhlichen Knaben, den Jüngling begeisterte Zauberschein. Sie wird mit dem Kreuz nicht begraben. Dann beschließt im Grabe den müden Lauf. Noch am Grabe pflanzt die Hoffnung auf, pflanzt die Hoffnung auf. Es ist kein Lehrer, kein Schmeichelwahn, erzeugt im Gehirne des Toren. Im Herzen kündet es laut sich an, zu was Besserem sind wir geboren. Und was die innere Stimme spricht, das täuscht die hoffende Seele nicht, die hoffende Seele nicht. Nancy? Philippines, okay. Dann, oh, danke. Hey, Michelle, you fold it? Yeah. So this is a song written by Johannes Brahms to a poem by Hermann Almers. It's what you might call a pastoral poem. It's a person who's lying in the tall grass, sending his gaze upward. The sound of the crickets is surrounding him and into the blue sky. And you have the white clouds floating by, and in the deep blue, he feels as if it's somehow a sweet dream. And then suddenly, he says, it's as if I died long ago and am floating along with the clouds, the beautiful clouds, enraptured. So I think the way Brahms sets the poem, to me, elevates it much beyond the idea of a simple pastoral, and to me signifies the idea of the simultaneity of eternity or our immortality. Ich ruhe still im hohen grünen Gras und sende laut
Brillen rings umschwirrt und Unterlass von Himmelsbläue, wundersam umwoben von Himmelsbläue, wundersam die schöne Wolken ziehen dahin durch tiefe Blau, die schöne Stille Träume, die schöne Stille Träume. Mir ist das längst, ich bin gestorben bin. Und ziehe selig durch ew'ge Räume und ziehe selig durch mit Träume,
Keep going? Okay. The Andi Freude, please. So, this is a Schubert setting of some of the Andi Freude poem, and I'll let people read along. It's 3 of these, but I wanted to emphasize, as Diane had, something that comes up at the end of the first and the final verse. Oh, so Ode to Joy. So if you contemplate joy, what you think joy is, what it might be, as you're, perhaps reading through during the song, he's describing different things that bring us joy. Very famously, anyway, very famously, Beethoven emphasizes in this state of joy, all people will become brothers. There's other joyous things. And this chorus, next time you'll all be my chorus when we get to these sections, okay? So above the canopy of the heavens, above the Sternenzelt, the canopy, there must reside a loving Father.
Michelle?
Oh.
So there's 3 slides here. You want
Yes.
me to listen and scroll as you sing?
Yeah. Or I could nod at you.
Give me a
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, because it's not during the musical interlude. That'll trick you. The musical interlude is here.
yeah.
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 Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Freude, Schuhe, gut ihr Funken, Tochter Deinen Sommer wird ein Wetter, was die Bauernstrecke teilt. Alle Menschen werden Brüder, wo dein sanfte Flügel weilt. Seid umschlungen Millionen, diesen Kuss der ganzen Welt. Brüder überm Sternenzelt, muss ein lieber Vater warnen. Der große Wurf gelungen, eines Freund zu sein. Wer ein Hodis Weib errungen, welche seinen Jubelein. Ja, wer auch nur eine Seele seinen Tod dem Herzen brot. Und wir's nie gekonnte Stille, weinen sich auch diesem Bund. Was den großen Ring bewohnet, hüllt die Gott der Sympathie. Zu den Sternen leitet sie, wo der Unbekannte thronet. Freude trägt kein aller Wesen an den Brüsten der Natur. Alle Güten, alle Bösen folgen ihrer Rosenschnur. Küsse gab sie uns ertreten, einen Freund geprüften Tod. Wohlus war dem Volk gegeben, und der Cherub steht vor Gott. Ihr stützt nieder Millionen, alles Glut in Schöpferwelt. Such ihn überm Sternenzelt, über Sternen muss wohnen.
So in just a minute, we're going to end the live stream, but I wanted Lainey to be here to stay, because it just is very striking, especially since the universal history was written before Schiller realized what a mess the French Revolution was going to turn out to be. You also hear in that the incredible optimism, and I was thinking of the difference just now of Beethoven's setting of that same poem, which I hope people know. If you don't, please go and listen to the Ninth Symphony, the last part, because the joy that Beethoven expresses in the Ninth Symphony, in a sense, is really gut-wrenching, and there's a great deal of, I don't like the word dissonance, but you could say instability. People know the symphony, da 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 da, bum, right? And then da 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 da, right? So in a sense, Beethoven's setting is, of course, this was one of his last works, is after they know all this. And in a sense, almost it's like I think it's taking Schiller's idea to a higher level, because man clearly has a lot farther to go, more to learn than they had hoped was the case. But Lainey, I just wanted to get your thoughts before we wrap up, if you're still in there. There you are.
I'm here.
Yeah, what do you, because, sorry, Jose, can you stop the echo or no? Don't worry about it then. I'll ignore it. The failure of the French Revolution, and also the fact that the United States has now become the opposite of what we were founded for. If you think about the incredible joy in the world of the American Revolution and the defeat of the British Empire, what Schiller expresses, the brotherhood of man, right, a world citizenry, that it was total liberation for the whole planet. And we have now been turned inside out. And one of the things that Lyndon LaRouche said in 2004, actually, but very apropos to today, is that we're at the end of an era. A rotten, old, bankrupt British imperial system is collapsing. The United States, perhaps mankind, but certainly not the United States, will not survive unless we return to the principles of our founding, for which you can hear there was so much joy actually in the world. And I think people don't often have an idea of this. I think it's a very exciting idea actually that we have to revive. But Lainey, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, that's a big question, Diane. I do think that we have to get. Well, I said it before when I talked. I think it's extremely important that people get strengthened. Okay, through Lyndon LaRouche, yes, but Schiller has a complete different, not different from LaRouche, but a different side, which is unique in his development of the idea that it is through beauty that you get to truth. And he actually develops this a little bit further than in the paper later on the sublime, that you have to have the sublime and the beautiful. This is not practical, and Lynn always said to us, don't be practical. If we are going to have the tools for the strengths inside of us, and also give what we can do uniquely, like what we just did in Afghanistan in the conference there, I think that Schiller is absolutely an indispensable friend to have throughout your entire life. It takes a lot of work, as it does with any really a real friend. It takes years and a lot of hard work to get to know another person really well, so it becomes a real friend. And I would encourage people to make Schiller a real friend in these days, weeks, and years and decades ahead, hopefully, because they'll create an anchor in you of strength to think like Schiller and also enhance your capability for understanding Lynn, I will say too. So you might be fishing for something else, but that's what I have to say. I think he is a extraordinary human being, and there's a reason we are called the Schiller Institute, and the founding document is the American Declaration of Independence, which kind of fits very good. I mean, you brought up Leibniz, Diane. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that we are all born with inalienable rights. Of these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, where the happiness is Leibniz's happiness for wisdom. And there, Schiller really can help you, each person individually, to strengthen his or her identity in the fight to come. So that's what I would say.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you. Thanks, everybody, for listening. This will conclude the live stream part of the show. If you're watching live, please sign up at sarahforsenate.com and please donate to the campaign.